Well, hello again there, inner genie friend. And today I wanted to talk a little bit about my input on what do we do when things we are doing are no longer working. Now, this has come to me as a result of just recognizing trends that within the concept of the controllables and the uncontrollables, right? Things like, for example, the economy. What the economy is doing out there is basically the result of how people, as a general rule in a mass of blue sea of people in the world, are behaving. Now, we're one of many, many billions, right? So, no matter what we think, we just because we think it, we're not going to change instantaneously the actions of others. So, if people stop buying our services, if people stop going to this nightclub and are going to this nightclub and so on, to a great extent, that's rather out of our control. Yes, we have some influence over people that we're close to, and if we have a big following and so on, sure. But for the most of us, it's like it's almost in the realm of the uncontrollable because we have control over what we think about that, how we act about it, and so on. But in terms of what they're doing in the moment, pretty much very little, right? So therefore, it's good to consider these sorts of things, I would say, from time to time. A lot of times when everything's going hunky dory, okay, we don't have to bother thinking about it. But when things go south for us once in a while, then it's a good idea to at least consider it, I say. So this is the basis upon which I want to talk about this. Now, um, I guess use the example of the economy. So say you live in an area, the economy was good, you got used to a certain level of employment or a certain number of people calling you or whatever for your services, your goods, and what have you, then you're sort of on a roll, right? But then when things beyond your control change, buying patterns change or whatever, and that phone stops ringing, that etc., what do you do? Well, of course, hopefully, we've there's been forethought of that, and there's contingencies, and there's multiple sources of getting the word out and such, right? But even then, if that goes south, like for example, years ago, some of you know that I like to read some of the stuff that Gary Halbert has to say, the old marketer himself, and he was talking to a client one time who was trying to help him out and get his business revived until Gary basically told him, why are you bothering? Because the circumstances under which this took place was there was a town somewhere in, I think it was Illinois, which the vast majority of people were employed by Sears Roebuck Corporation. Sears Roebuck went bust, laid off most of the people, closed the dispatch centers, and so on. And this guy was trying to figure out how to boost his residential house construction business in that town. Gary Halbert's point is, in a case like that, you kind of got to know when the game's up, right? Because if the whole model under which you are operating no longer exists, then at that point you have to look further afield and so on. So in a case like that, if the guy was to examine, okay, so it's not quite working here, where is a location that it is working? Now, it wouldn't mean that he has to move there necessarily. He could say, okay, so say that town is gone flat, but there's another town where maybe another distributor opened up and a lot of the people who used to be employed there went to that town. Well, that town now needs the services. That town needs the houses. That town needs the trucking. That town needs all this sort of thing going on. And you could put this onto the internet or wherever too, but wherever markets go on, exchanges of ideas. Take it to dating and so on. I mean, there was a town, I think it was a place in British Columbia called Chetwynd. Like 80% of the people there were men because it was like a resource town. And meanwhile, ladies who couldn't find a partner will be living in a town where there's mostly girls. So an idea might be, hey, move to that town. It's like go where the opportunity is. At least go there or visit there or something like that. So in the case of this guy who was building houses in this town where Sears Roebuck went bust, maybe he'd look at transferring over to that town or providing services to that town. Doesn't necessarily have to move, could set up a division, could set up a delivery service to deliver product to that town, or what have you. And recently I was listening to something that Dan Locke was saying, and he has a lot of valuable things to say, I think, too. And he was talking about Tim Ferriss and the 4 Hour Work Week. And his point was that in reality, the idea of a 4 hour work week is bullshit. Because here's the thing, sure, it might be okay for a while. You get things all tickety-boo and set up, automated and so on. But the thing is, things change. People change. There's those uncontrollables, right? So for example, I used to do quite a bit. I used to put a lot of notices on Kijiji and also on Meetup. I noticed that both of those aren't working like they used to. For whatever reason, I don't know. It's not for me to try to figure it out. I could sit back and try to figure it out. I think it's because people move on, especially in the electronic world. They go from Facebook over to something else, and they move all over the place. So unless we're, so if we're, but that, so that's the point here. When things go south, in terms of what it is that we're doing, like we're not getting the interaction we used to get, I think it's because it's not that people have stopped doing what they're doing in life. One town was doing really great. Well, for whatever reason it was doing great, the projects that were going on there, whatever, have slowed down. But the people who are energetic are still going to be working. Number one, they're either going to be in the vestige, like they're going to be in the jobs that they're in, or if they're not, they're going to probably migrate somewhere else, either virtually or physically, and they're going to pick up what they're doing over there. And so we can also participate in that by being open-minded in terms of our potential and what we have to offer. A little story here to do with years ago there was a guy named Raymond Aaron who used to teach real estate courses and business courses and what have you, and he was talking about this in terms of idea generation for people. And he might have been talking way back in the day when Fort Mac was just in its major upswing, like in the early 90s or whatever. And he talked about how this one guy, he saw that this was, the trend in that town was up, 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 up in terms of business activity, right? So what he did is he went out and on the main road into the town, he camped out there for a few days on a siding or whatever. And he started counting the number of trucks going in loaded and the number of trucks going out unloaded, flat decks and so on. And then he picked out the ones that he saw most often. Then he was a little bit of a sort of an investigator in a way, right? Then he started following those trucks and finding out where they're going to. And there was building materials and household furnishings and all this sort of thing. So then he realized, okay, well, these are the hot items. So it was an idea of, okay, here's what I could provide. So there's all this delivery of building materials going in. Now, is there enough people to provide the local distribution of those materials? Because there's a big transport trucks coming in, dropping off at warehouses and such. Is there enough demand to deliver all that? Is there enough demand to assemble whatever has to be assembled, and so on? So it's an idea generation, because in times of motion, from say low economic value to higher economic value, or even just energy. Take the example of that town in BC that had all the guys and very few girls. Think of the energy that a girl moving into that town would feel, or if it was the flip side. If there was a whole town full of nurses and a guy moved in there or something, and there'd be action, generate a curiosity and sort of a demand, on a very practical level. So it's a way of looking at things, I think, in terms of how to reinvigorate ourselves when things that are out of our control go south. And as far as the Dan Lok thing, talking about the 4 hour work week, the reason he said it's bullshit is because, yes, for a time we can get it set up, but then things can happen. Like, things can happen that are out of our control. And if all we've ever done is just set up things to run automated, but we don't have a way of constantly checking in on a regular basis to keep on tweaking it, we can lose out by something that comes in that's out of our control and sort of knocks us out. I think of Jimmy Pattison when he set up his massive number of stores out in BC and, Save on Foods and what have you. One of the things he did early in life, I heard one of his kids in an interview one time, and what they did, they never took their holidays were basically working holidays. They'd travel around in a camper or whatever, and he would visit every one of his stores as often as he could. He'd just walk in and start working there, because he had to check all these stores. He had to keep up on them because there was no such thing as a 4 hour work week for him. He had to monitor them. And Dan Locke's point is that, Ferriss is not working 4 hours. If he's running a large organization, he's not working 4 hours. Sure, he might not be in at the office every day, but you can be sure he's on his computer and he's checking things and he's communicating with people and so on. Anybody who's running a big organization, even a small organization, the small organizations that I've run, they take up time, no matter how systematized you have them. Whenever you have them systematized, then you got to monitor the system. Then you got to take and become so much more efficient that you get more and more business going on, and you got to deal with that and so on. So it's all a growth. It's all a growth curve, and and if we don't stop that, if we stop that innovation and so on, what happens is the competitors or the people who are doing something similar, they start to sift off the other people you're dealing with. Like, for example, I tend to run a one-man show, and last summer I ran for 5 months on one job. As a consequence, everybody else that I had been working with, they've gone. They're gone to work with other people because they needed their services done. I wasn't able to provide it, so they went elsewhere. So where are they now? Elsewhere. So it's an ongoing thing about always being aware of the things that we don't have control over, but yet being aware at the same time of things we do have control over. So if things go south in our neighborhood or whatever, there's always farther afield, both physical and virtual, I would say. So if there's any value in that, I guess it's just being open-minded and recognizing the value that we have to provide, that it is real, and though it's but the market can fluctuate, and sometimes we have to look further afield or be a little bit creative in either what we're providing or where we can provide it, etc., etc. So anyway, if this was any value to you, please like, subscribe, and share. And whatever you do, ding the bell too. Apparently that you get notice of things that I've updated. And if you try to find me online, it's innergenie.com, where you can find my blogs, my old blogs, another YouTube channel, Facebook, and BitChute, and all those different things. So have a look there and comment in the box below, and we'll talk again soon. Bye for now.